Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Alice Colgrave. On behalf of Robin, Alexandra, Alyssa and Michael, I welcome you all here today, and I thank all of you for being here to support them and each other. I also welcome and thank all of you who are unable to be here in person today, but are watching the live stream. It can be heartbreaking when extenuating circumstances dictate that loved ones are unable to attend. In particular, the family would like to acknowledge and welcome Robin's sisters, Jan and Heather and Neville, Lee's nephew, Brett and Karen, Jane and Dave Cummings, and Hugh and Carla Humphreys, and all of their respective families. These are indeed challenging times, but what we're all feeling is very real, and even though some of the love and support may be virtual today, it is felt by the family, and the fact that you are all here in one way or another will be of great comfort and consolation to them in the months and years to come. This afternoon we are here to remember, to celebrate, to honour and be thankful for the life of a great man, Lee Virgin. Lee was many things to many people: a dearly loved husband, father, grandfather, son, brother, uncle, friend, mentor, colleague and companion. His life ended way too soon but peacefully on Monday the 6th of July at the Flinders Medical Centre. He was 66 years old. It's with great sadness that we all come together today. It's often said around these times by way of comfort that only the good die young. But it's very hard to even begin to comprehend that when that good person in your life is your husband or your dad or your papa or your brother or your uncle or your very dear friend. So today is about honouring and remembering an exceptional man who's touched all of our lives in many different ways. We come together today to support each other and to celebrate Lee's life and be thankful for the time that we've all had with Lee in our lives. So this afternoon we'll all pause for a moment to honour and remember Lee Virgin. Lee was Robin's loving husband and best friend for 34 years. He was an adored father of Alexandra, Alyssa and Michael, father-in-law to Peter and Nathan, and much-loved son of Richard and Valma. Lee was a doting papa to Imogen, Max, Ava, Charlie and Lucas, and a brother of Terry, Wendy, Cheryl and Peter, a proud brother-in-law, an uncle to many and a friend to us all. Lee fought a courageous battle and he faced his illness with a stoic defiance. He never complained. That wasn't an option for him. And he tried very hard for the discomfort not to affect anything or anyone around him. Lee was a man of substance. He was one of life's true gentlemen. Lee took the most out of the life he was offered, and he will be deeply, deeply missed. As we spend this time together this afternoon, it's most appropriate that we should now recall just a little of Lee's life story. Not surprisingly, we have a number of speakers today who will share their memories with us about Lee. But it's also an opportunity for all of you to reflect and to affirm the indelible impression that Lee has had on your lives in ways that are unique and special to each of you. I'm now going to invite Robin, who's going to start with some thank yous and just welcome everyone, and she's going to come with Michael, her son, to deliver a eulogy on behalf of the family.
Thanks, everyone. Many times through these last few years, I was asked, do you think Lee is in denial? My answer was always clear. He was in defiance. He never let his diagnosis define him or stop him. Lee was involved with so many diverse things in his life, and from these we're blessed to have formed beautiful lifelong friendships as a family. I'm here to thank you all, not for only coming today, but to those of you who have extended to support not only Lee, but to us as a family over the years, and especially the last 18 months, which have been a roller coaster ride, and I thank you all. Thanks also to the terrorised nursing staff at Flinders Infusion Suite who had to coordinate their treatments around Lee's diary to enable him to go to Wallaroo for fishing trips, board meetings at the club, trips away and family gatherings. And to the nursing staff of 5G and 4A for their incredible care over the last 3 months. But also to the silent supporters, those who give blood and platelets. You've no idea what a difference that makes to a person's daily life. Last of all, to Drs Bryony Kuss, Associate Professor, Head of Molecular Medicine, and Craig Wallington-Beddoes, Senior Research Fellow, Clinical and Haematologist, for their above and beyond care. The treatment opportunities that were given to Lee enabled him to live a longer and better life. Our last meeting with Craig Wallington-Beddoes was in the last week of February as an outpatient. Both Lee and I were always enormously nervous prior to these appointments because we'd always have to anticipate that month's results and hope for the best. That particular meeting, I was a lot more nervous than usual. 2 days before, Lee looked at me and said, "Ferg, you can come, but don't speak." If any of you know us Ferguson girls, that's a skill that has never been learnt. We arrived at the appointment and Craig greets us with one of his lovely, friendly smiles. He sits us both down and goes through the most successful response that Lee has had to the drugs in 12 months. Oncologists love their spreadsheets and their figures. So while he was regaling us with these numbers, the whole while I was sitting there going, "Please don't do it, please don't do it, please don't do it." Craig finished his talk with a massive beam on his face and said, "Right, we're ready to go with this potential life-saving, game-changing stem cell treatment." And then he did it. Well, thank you, Craig, for that. However, March is pretty busy for me. I've got the Broken Hill races, a couple of board meetings, and of course the North Adelaide Football Club golf day. It's pretty important. April also looks pretty full on. I've got a luncheon at Rockford's and a weekend away with friends. And of course, let's not forget Easter. It's a big time for the family and friends at the shack. I can't let them down. I've told the board not to expect me around the club in May. I can see myself available then. The look on Craig's face said it all. The high five was still hanging, and the conversation that followed for the first time in Lee's life was very one-sided. We did get to the Broken Hill races, but because of COVID, we'll never know who really won that argument. The lunch at Rockford's never happened. Easter was shut down and the football season ground to a halt. Virgie, not only did you manage to fill your diary, but you filled ours as well. Good work and have a beauty.
I can tell you this isn't going to go as well as that, so just bear with me. Thomas Lee Virgin was born on the 22nd of October in 1953 into the loving arms of Rick and Val Virgin. Dad was joined by, in childhood, to Terry, Wendy, Cheryl and Peter. Dad grew up in Ferryden Park in a house that I'll remember for putt-putt golf and Easter eggs, but Dad would remember it for throwing rocks at the neighbours with Terry. Dad went to Ferryden Park Primary and Woodville High School, where I'd like to think he aced all years. However, I find it hard to believe he did that whilst out on the oval kicking the footy or at billiards halls. But I was completely wrong, as Dad was made head prefect whilst hustling blokes at pool. I learnt that the hard way myself upstairs at Gower Street. "I'm not that good," he said to me. Yet 30 seconds later, he had the 8 ball in the pocket and the biggest lean-back laugh I'd ever seen. "I'll set him up, mate, mugs away." I went on to hear that for 11 more years before I beat him. And I hit him with the exact same laugh. What I wouldn't do to lose to him for 11 more. During his childhood, he enjoyed many wonderful days at Swan Reach for Easter and other holidays, where he, Auntie Wendy, Uncle Terry, Gayleen Paul and Patrick Bates would go smoking in the willow trees on the River Murray, thinking that Nana and Papa would have no idea what they'd been doing. However, it didn't occur to this future head prefect that they'd be able to smell the smoke on his clothes. Naturally, they denied it. Nana, however, was very switched on. She even deciphered the code they'd use. That must have taken her some time, I'm sure. He was a shit as a kid, always giving Nana and Papa grief. He was the blonde, curly bomb who always smiled but had the devil in him. Always with friends around and always playing sport, whether it be for school teams or Ferdinand Park Football Club. He was a natural at footy, golf or cricket. He'd always be getting into scraps. If Nana said don't do it, then of course he would. A curly blonde shit, always playing sport, scrapping, not doing what he's told, and has a lot of great friends. I feel like I'm talking about someone else. When school finished, he worked in the CBA bank straight away and lived a sort of double life. Suits on Monday to Friday, and on Saturday, Sunday, leather jackets, holes in jeans and motorbikes. Senior would sometimes take Auntie Cheryl and Auntie Wendy for rides on the back of his bike, a Honda 750, but still managed to drive it like a nana. Dad was always cautious of his precious cargo. He was a slow driver with us in the car too. 45s and 50s, 55s and 60s. Dad never got a ticket, but shit, it was frustrating. I even toyed with the idea one day of writing my own ticket, charging him $430 with a couple of demerits. For some reason I didn't go ahead with it though, maybe because I thought I knew the result that would become of me. From 1975 to 77, Dad was in Alice Springs. He decided a move was a good idea after his bike riding days extended to a friendship circle that didn't quite see it as a hobby. After he found his bike stolen and dumped in a pond south in the gardens of South Terrace, he saw it as a sign. He was greeted at the Alice Springs airport by representatives of the Rovers Footy Club. They were keen to sign him up. He loved playing footy there and keeps in regular contact with many of the players of that era. Our friend Muzzy now lives in the same suburb, and they enjoyed regular catch-ups for beer and a feed, a tradition that I will continue on. Senior partied with Muzzy hard after the games Saturdays, to the point where he would be escorted home by his copper friends on a Saturday night, and they would even come and check on Dad at the bank on Monday. All those nights you gave me shit. In 1983, Dad went to work in Bordertown. During this time, he would meet a blonde bombshell of his own by the name of Robin Ferguson. He didn't know it at the time, but everything was about to change for him. My auntie seems to feel he was a little lost in his life, but not anymore. He became happy and complete. They would date for a few years before getting married in January of 1986, and the first twinkle of Dad's eye would leave him not long after, and he and Mum would welcome into the world the beautiful Alexandra Brie Virgin. Alexandra was a great distraction from Glenelg beating North Adelaide in the grand final just months earlier. Apart from being his firstborn, of course. Dad and Mum took Alexandra home to Mitchell Park, then to Happy Valley 2 years later, where Dad would teach Alexandra to ride, assuming whilst Mum had a G&T in her hand. A couple of years later, in February of 1989, Mum and Dad welcomed the beautiful Alyssa Donnell Virgin, the newest blonde bombshell of the family. Dad would share 2 years at Torrens Street with the girls before moving to Farriers Way at Woodcroft, where he would teach Alyssa to ride her bike as well, however with a different outcome. While Alyssa was riding her bike, Popper had his famous camera out. And Alyssa being Alyssa, "Watch me, Popper, watch me, Popper." Perhaps Dad got caught in the moment as well. As Alyssa was waving at Popper, down she went over the veranda edge and falling a few feet. And I reckon still to this day on the camera you can hear Alexandra's evil giggle in the background. 1 year later, in December of 92, the greatest day of Senior's life had come. I was born. From that day on, I was able to share his name and share a best mate. He too taught me how to ride a bike, how to kick a footy on both feet, but I just thank God he didn't teach me how to sing. Nails on a chalkboard. Dad always had the instinct of protection. He'd always do anything to protect his family. One night after putting me to bed, a while later, Dad had a feeling that something wasn't quite right. He couldn't go to sleep. He then went down to check on me and found me with the end stitching of a blanket around my neck choking me. He untangled the blanket and saved my life. How is that for one of the first things he did for me? You can imagine what the next 27 years was like. At the same house, we enjoyed so many great childhood things like feeding the animals on the farm, swinging the pool where Fraser would break every one of our toys, including my brand new WWF bodyboard that Uncle Dave, Auntie Cheryl, Brett and Craig had just got me. Apparently foam isn't an effective diving board. Dad also built us a cubby house at the back where we'd add our own thing to it, like flying foxes, for example. However, how would you know these things would work? Well, you'd have to send someone down them for testing. This would then start a trend of Dad and Auntie Jo walking outside and finding our cousin Taylor on the ground in different positions. Much to Dad's worry, though, it was always found with a giggle from Taylor every time. Recently at Wallaroo, Dad heard it on the phone whilst I was speaking to her. After I hung up, he said, "I recognise that laugh. I could listen to that all day." During this time, Sunday barbecues at Auntie Sue's, Uncle Terry's were a big thing for us too. We'd all get together, swim in the pool, or Amber would make us watch Dirty Dancing for the 30th time. One day on the way home from Auntie Sue's, Alexandra asked why Dad was always driving home from there. Dad turned around and smiled and said nothing. But what he really meant was, "Alexandra, your mum, Auntie Nuala, and $4.95 bottles of Carrington Blush is why I always drive home." But he would let it slide though, because he loved his Nuala and she loved her Keith. These Sunday barbecues have now moved to Auntie Sue's and Poppy Shack at Wallaroo with Adam, Lisa, Ian, Amber and Adam. No, they're not the same three people. And all of the kids, and I can still confirm Mum and Sue still don't drive home. Dad wasn't just a dad, he was an uncle too. I know what that means and it's pretty bloody special. Brett describes him as the cool uncle to him. He said, "I always looked up to him with a sense of awe as a boy, which never really went away. He set an example for me, gave me a good deal to learn from and a great deal to think about, particularly as I got older. But most of all, he gave me a wonderful set of cousins to grow with. I'm forever grateful to have known and loved him." My cousin Mark tells the story of when he visited Adelaide for a family event and stayed at our Gower Street home, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, most particularly the cellar, or Dad's fourth child. Dad would hate people bringing beers and wine. He was always prided himself on stocking and providing. Mark, however, felt guilty and brought a slab of Crown Lager to stock us boys for the weekend. When Mark arrived with the luggage and the alcohol, Dad asked, "What's this, mate? I've got plenty of grog." Dad was grateful, however, and Mark took the beers downstairs, whilst Dad kept it to himself that Mark had done so. It got to Sunday and a few of the boys were around the back table, and Dad leaned over to Mark and asked if he could get a round of beers from downstairs while Dad took the empties to the shed. Mark happily went down, thinking he was doing the right thing, and came back up with the Crownies. Dad then looked at me, Nathan, Peter, Terry, Neville, Fraser, Richie, and anyone else who was sitting around there and goes, "How's this wanker? Comes to my house, bring nothing, and drinks all my beers." There's always a step ahead. Dad not only loved Mark, but all the Victorians would make a point for us to travel over there. Many fun Ocean Grove weekends had Auntie Jan, Terry, Auntie Heather, Uncle Nev, or as he loved to call him, Brownie, you old dog. Although Dad loved them all, I just think he enjoyed the chance to go over there and drink the grog they had stocked. However, it was stocked and provide he did. 30 years of service at Hill Ross Financial Planning with his own practice, including many late nights at the start, earning very little, while Mum would help him, whilst also cooking for us kids too. It may have started little, but Dad worked his ass off and achieved many things. He started off on the sales team and then promoted to agent at Burnside in 1989. In 98 and 99, he was awarded the Gold Award winner, and then for 8 straight years, 2010 to 2017, he was given the Strategist Award. 8 straight years. Then to top it off, in 2018, he was awarded the Amicus, and then to retirement he went. He could then enjoy things a little bit more in his life, like planning holidays for us as a family overseas. Mum and Dad took us to Thailand and Bali, where we would have some of the best times as a family. Dad, like everyone else, took advantage of the cheap markets over there. And one of the days, Dad came back with singlets for us boys. Nathan, Peter, Alec and myself were in the pool having a beer when my dad came back. I don't reckon I've had many more proud moments as a son than when you see your father walk back in with a singlet saying, "I'm not gay, but $20 is $20. He also made the most of Wallaroo, a place that he would holiday as a kid and then pass it on to us, that tradition on to us. A place where we would all learn how to fish and enjoy that on the wharf of the jetty with Nan and Pop, or eventually Dad's boats, Arthur Serenity and Son of Serenity. One day us kids woke up early and we wanted to go fishing, but Mum and Dad just wanted to sleep in. So Dad sent us down the beach with 3 rods and rigs and went back to bed to read the paper. After a while of reading the shares and sports, Mum and Dad heard us screaming from the beach. Mum, Dad, Mum, Dad. I'm sure instead of being worried, Dad was thinking, what's he bloody done now? The girls are screaming that I'd caught a fish, and I know for a fact that Dad was thinking, how's he done that? I gave him a shit rig. But fair enough, I reeled in this 45 centimetre flathead and I thought I was Rex Hunt. I showed it to Dad, and to his confirmation, this poor flathead had his tail caught, then tangled its body and eventually strangled itself. He made me feel like a king though, and filleted it and sent me off to my first date with a woman. However, it was my grandma's house and it was her favourite fish. Many fishing memories were had, including one eye-opening experience on the boat when Dad cast out and jagged a seagull in midair. He always used that to brag that he was the best fisherman. I'm the only one here that's caught a fish with wings. Who else has done that? It's a weird brag, but I couldn't argue it. Perhaps some of his greatest memories were there when he was be able to share them as a grandfather, or as he liked to label himself, Special Popper, where he would share Imogen and Max's first fish, or watching Ava Charlie Lucas splash around with Arby in the shallows. Dad loved that place, and he loved nothing more for us to continue to go there and have our families do the same. I promise you, mate, I'll make that happen. We'll get the others their first fish. I'll continue to take the photos of your sunset, and I'll continue to catch, cook, and drink the beers with Barnsey. Another place that Dad loved was the North Adelaide Football Club, a place that he enjoyed from a young age and would take me to games as a baby onwards. Years of supporting the club would include years in the prospectors group, the VPs group, the board, and then eventually as president of the club. We had some pretty good memories there together, from taking me to my first game as a baby, to taking me to my first training as a 17-year-old, and then to watch me debut. I was able to win a reserves premiership there with him as president, and then 2 years later he won a League One. I saw firsthand how hard that man worked for that place, and as hard as it was not winning it with him, I bloody loved that he did, because no one else deserved it more. 1 year later I got mine, and even though he never admitted it, he was a Glenelg supporter that day. But one thing he was a Michael Virgin supporter. And I'll never forget the hug we shared in the change rooms after the game. Oh, Jesus. But it wasn't just that day, it was my whole life. He was my number one fan, and I was his. I can't fathom that we won't share anything more. I had so much more to show you, Dad. However, all I can do is thank you. On behalf of everyone you came across in your 66 years of life. A loyal, loving and caring man that just deserves so much more. And now to thank you on behalf of me. My loving father and my best mate. You gave Mum, me and the girls, and all the kids the best life. You opened the door to all my friends, made them your own whilst putting up with all of our shit. You taught me everything, mate, and hopefully I can do it half as good as you. Goodbye, senior. Enjoy the serenity.
Thank you both for those beautiful words. I'm now going to invite Andrew Suter, who's going to speak about Lee's connections with footy.
It's a hard act to follow. I may repeat a few things, so please forgive me. I'd like to start by saying that I'm deeply honoured that Robin asked me to speak today. My name's Andrew Suter. I'm the chairman of the North Adelaide Football Club, and Lee was my friend. Lee was a man who liked nice things, and this venue and the number of people I'm looking at is evidence of that. I'd say he'd be absolutely rapt that his funeral's being held here and blown away by the number of people at this service. That being said, if anyone's in the market for a nice current model Range Rover, Robin reckons she's going to have to sell that to pay for it. So I suggested that she might want to drive it in today, park it out the front of the Barry Robin statue, put a North scarf over the dash and a for sale sign on the window, but I'm not sure if she did that. Probably not, but it was a thought that counts. Before I talk about the Lee I knew, I'd like to talk very briefly about his family and the business he founded. I'll keep that brief because I'm at the risk of repeating. Robin told me a story recently about one of her first dates with Lee. Lee took Robin to a football game, a Glenelg North game naturally. Robin presented herself immaculately as always, wearing her tight black leather pants, tight woolen top, and looking quite the sight. She was enjoying the pre-match atmosphere, and then the siren sounded to start the first quarter. What she didn't expect, however, was to see Lee turn into a white line fever, win-at-all-costs North Adelaide supporter. The ebbs and the flows of the game brought out some words and phrases Robin hadn't heard in Lee at that stage, and that really opened her eyes. In fact, he had a match-long heated discussion with a Glenelg supporter who happened to be on crutches, which resulted in Lee kicking out said crutches from under him at the end of the game when he left, with Robin trailing behind him. What am I getting myself into, she thought. Robin was in it sorry, you did tell me. Robin was in it for the long haul, however, and in the years that followed brought 3 beautiful children into the world, Alexandra, Alyssa and Michael. Having all grown up, the girls went on to have families of their own, filling the Virgin household with childhood laughter in recent years. Michael, of course, went on to create his own successful commercial electrical business a few years ago, and Lee was immensely proud of that. Lee was very proud of each of his children and his grandchildren, and he often spoke very fondly of his girls and Michael and beamed when he spoke about his grandchildren. On a lighter note, Robin also recounted another story to me recently, where she and Lee were sitting quietly at home when she heard a knock on the front door and opened it to find 2 bikies at the door asking for Lee. Robin didn't know what to think, but Lee presented himself at the door and got a mouthful from the 2 bikies who'd said how disappointed they were that he didn't attend one of their people's recent funeral. Most people know, of course, that Lee did run with some bikie mates back in the day. It's also widely known that Lee loved his little piece of paradise at Wallaroo. My wife Julie and I were fortunate enough to stay there, which was usually followed by a couple of days of recovery. That seemed to be the norm. Lee loved his wine, and Robin likes one or two as well, as we know. Lee and Robin headed up there on every available opportunity with family or on their own, particularly after they built their magnificent, not-so-shack-like house that sits there now. Not content with that, they went on to build an equally magnificent new home in Glenelg and moved into that a couple of years ago. Most of us know, of course, that Lee started his career in finance with the Commonwealth Bank. In fact, one of his longest football club friendships stems from those days. I'm talking about Reg Pearce, who's known Lee for over 40 years. Early days involved moves to country branches and ultimately back to Adelaide. Lee was a leader in the financial services industry and founded his own business, Leadham Shepherd, over 30 years ago. Lee and Robin worked very hard on the business over the years, and Lee collected a stack of awards along the way and retired only 2 years ago, if we've heard. Lee wasn't unlike most other blokes, really. He loved his footy, the cricket, played golf, and he loved his fishing, which he did a lot of at Wallaroo. Lee had plenty of golfing buddies, including Reg Pearce and John Neville, both fellow President's Group members at North Adelaide. Lee had friends everywhere you turned. He knew just about everyone. And if there was someone he didn't know, he'd ask for an introduction. He was famous for it. Lee enjoyed lifetime friendships with a small group of blokes, including Muzzy for almost 50 years and Reg for over 40. Glenn Musgrave and Andrew Pearce I'm talking about. Lee was a lifelong North Adelaide Football Club supporter like his father before him. He absolutely loved the place. With others, Lee founded the Prospectors Club at North in the 80s and was a President's Group member for over 20 years, serving on the committee for most of that time. Lee was both proud of his business and of his club, so he brought the two together, with Leedham Shepherd becoming a long-time sponsor of the North Adelaide Football Club. Lee was a very generous man when it came to his donations for our club's annual gala event, often offering up his Wallaroo holiday home or one of many fishing expeditions. Continuing on with the wine theme, I have first-hand knowledge of the magnificent lunches and dinners we've enjoyed over the years, including those lunches he held with our past coach and a small group of friends, the price of entry of which was a bottle of Grange each. Generous on the home front, Lee and Robin welcomed many Rooster players into their home over the years and hosted sausage sizzles pre-game when North played at Glenelg Oval. Every father who has a son and loves football dreams of his son playing for his club. And Lee got that wish with Michael. Michael won a reserves premiership at North in 2016 and later went on to win a league premiership at Glenelg in 2019. Lee was immensely proud of his son stepping away from under his wing at North and doing it on his own on the big stage at Glenelg. I believe that Michael is due to play his 50th league game when he runs out next, and I'm sure that'll be a massive day for him. There's a funny tale I'd like to share with you, something that will make sense to all of those who knew Lee well. The tale was told to me by our President's Group Chairman, Chris McSporran, recently, and it played out when Lee was in his comfort zone at the football club with all the layers peeled back. And it goes like this. A small recent tale about Lee's great characteristics of courage, commitment and humour. Late last season, the Roosters were playing Adelaide at Prospect. Lee was having one of his more intense treatment periods and indicated he wouldn't be attending the match as there was a family commitment earlier that morning and he didn't think he'd be up for such a long day. To our surprise, however, Lee arrived just after the start of the match, resplendent as usual in suit, club shirt, tie and badge. At half-time we did the usual and adjourned to the pavilion. The Reb was flowing very freely, members enjoying that the Roosters were competitive against Adelaide. To give themselves a viewing advantage for the last quarter, Lee, Graham Radloff and Chris McSporran secured a treadmill running machine each. Naturally, they'd been road tested to check that the drink bottle holders firmly secured a glass of red. Late in the fourth quarter, leading by more than 4 goals and a Roosters victory assured, they decided to put further effort into another celebratory bottle of red. In opening the bottle and toasting the impending success, Chris McSporran said to his treadmill colleagues, "Here's to the 3 wise viewing monkeys, the drunk, the desperate and the dying." Chris immediately realised the horror of what he'd said. Before he could dig himself out of this one, Lee, with that great beguiling smile, looked at Graham and responded, "Macca, I think you'll need to be more specific as to who's who." It was Lee. On a more serious note, Lee's greatest personal achievements at North were, of course, during his time on our board. Lee spent a number of years on the board and in recent years as president, managing the external review of our football club in 2017 through to a league premiership in 2018. Lee wore the president's tie very well and made it his mission to spend as much time as he could with members from every corner of the ground. From a personal point of view, I absolutely love the late night chats over a glass of red discussing what we can do better at the club and how we go about it. To finish off, in my book, the proof of a man's wealth is not how much he owns or how many fancy things he has, but how he's represented on the way out. And looking around the room, I'd say that Lee's just about the wealthiest man I've ever met. He was a magnificent bloke who loved and adored his family. He was our club president and he was my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that with us. So I'm now going to invite Richard Lovell, who's going to speak about his time with Lee and his work.
Well, I have to say that trying to cram everything great that I know about Lee Virgin into a 10-minute eulogy is an impossible task. So you might want to make yourselves comfortable. I was privileged to work with Lee in his financial planning practice for a period of 18 years, 14 of which were spent in partnership together. Not just any partnership, but a truly solid partnership that was based on mutual respect and remained strong without falter from the day we signed contracts back in 2004 until the day that I delivered his retirement speech, which I'm sad to say was only 2 years ago. It's hard to believe that it was just over 20 years ago when I met Lee for the first time. Fresh out of uni, I arrived at his offices on King William Road for a job interview. With his mo, the freshly shaved scalp, the perfect suit and the hush puppies, my first impression was that he looked like and had the demeanour of a cop. As he threw a barrage of interview questions at me with about as much emotion as you'd expect from a Russian poker player, I remember feeling like I was in a police interrogation room, shivering in my boots, and recall a moment when I started to answer one of his questions, where I was overrun with nerves and panic that I had to ask whether or not I could try my answer again. At that point, I was expecting this stiff taskmaster to stand up and show me the door. However, he replied in a warm and comforting voice, "You take as long as you need, my friend." And at that point, I realised that Lee was much more empathetic than he looked. So when I think of Lee now, which is often, I think of a genuinely empathetic person who was stern yet understanding, and I feel lucky to have had the privilege of working alongside him for as long as I did. I also think about generosity and integrity. Rare qualities these days, but they were so important to Lee, and it shone through in everything he did, from dealing with clients and managing staff to speaking with a random stranger on the street. Another thing that was really very important to Lee was that we didn't leave lights on in the office when we weren't using them. So today we're saying goodbye to a truly wonderful human being. Sorry. who had an impact on each of our lives, and I'm offered to have been asked to stand up here today and reflect upon Lee Virgin as I knew him. As Alice said, Lee was many things to many people: an adoring husband, a proud father, a grandfather, a friend, a financial advisor, a club leader, an ambassador, a voice of reason, and a shoulder to cry on, just to name a few. To myself, he was initially my boss, who became a willing mentor, a friend, and at times he was often a father figure, helping me to navigate the many curveballs that life often throws us. We had a bond from the beginning, and he had my back ever since then. Having worked with Lee since I was 21 years old, I learned from his views, his perspectives, and wealth of knowledge, and I feel that he was able to instill in me many of his values that I admired him for. I know that from speaking with his clients and his friends that I've adopted many of his mannerisms, quotes, icebreakers that he used to use, and I guess this just happens naturally when you work with someone that you truly respect and admire for so long. The tributes that have been flowing in from Lee's previous clients and work colleagues over the past few days are symbolic of the positive impact he was able to make on people as a result of his work. I've had many an emotional discussion with Lee's clients and friends over the past week, and it's clear that he was good at what he did because he absolutely loved what he did. And I thought I'd just read a short message that was sent to us, which I think sums up the type of relationship Lee had with most, if not all, of his clients. "Hello, Richard. Very sad news indeed. Lee was much more than a financial advisor to us. He played an important role in helping our sense of security, but he also became a valued confidant and friend. Fond memories of very enjoyable discussions that wandered a long way off finances. And it was a similar thread through each of the supportive messages we received in Lee's honour over the past week. Even after his retirement, Lee's ongoing concern for and his interest in his clients was evident in every discussion that I had with him. We'd catch up regularly, and he'd always ask how specific clients were going and what they were up to. He said that whilst retirement was rewarding him in many ways, he missed the relationships with his clients and staff. He truly cared for each and every one of them, and this showed in the quality of his work. Reflecting upon the later years of working with Lee, it was the simple pleasures that we enjoyed as business partners, and this included our third business partner, Greg Fragoulis, who joined us in 2012. Lee would come in after a weekend at Wallaroo, he'd poke his head in my office and say, "RL, meet me in the boardroom. I got you, me and Greggy something special for lunch today." And this would mean that on his way back from Wallaroo, he'd stopped at the bakery that he loved in Port Wakefield, stocked up on either their famous sausage rolls, pies or pasties. He'd take it upon himself to heat them up, plate them up with the appropriate amount of tomato sauce, and have them beautifully presented, complete with knife, fork and napkin on the boardroom table for us to enjoy over a lunch break. It was during those lunches that we would solve the world's problems. And many of our personal ones too. May have even created a few new ones. But when I was writing this, I realised that Lee had been doing this ever since I'd worked with him. He knew I loved his mother's fruitcake and cornflake cookies, so every week he would make sure that he always brought in an extra one just for me. And he would use it to take time over a short morning tea break to check in on me and make sure all was okay. This even stemmed back to when I was just his lackey. He was such a good bloke. He was always very passionate about the Hillross Financial Planning Group and was proud to be a Hillross advisor. He developed some amazing lifelong friendships within the network, many of which he considered brothers and would have done anything for. He loved this close-knit group of guys, and he had a special bond with each of them spanning well beyond the 20 years that I'd known him. I have a note from a Hillross colleague, Jim Shepherd, that I would like to recite, which I think captures the essence of the respect that Lee will always have from his Hillross peers. It goes like this. My relationship with Lee was mainly professional, though we did share a love of the sea. I did, however, like him a lot, and there was a lot to like about him. Primarily to me, he was a very decent bloke who strived to be the best he could be according to his own exacting standards, both as a person and in his business life. He clearly loved his family, he clearly loved his work, and through that work, making a positive difference to the lives of his clients. When it came time for me to retire, many of my clients were friends who had become clients or clients who had become friends. Their welfare was important to me, and I can honestly say that I was very happy to transfer my own financial planning practice to one under Lee's stewardship because I knew they would be well looked after. You were a good man, Lee. Rest easily. As I've said, Lee was a true leader, and this was reflected in the relationships he had with his staff at Leedham Shepherd. Not one of boss and employee, but rather a relationship of encouragement and support. He would empower his staff to improve and develop beyond what their roles required of them, and he would get immense satisfaction from seeing them succeed and progress. He was certainly no pushover. Like any business owner, he wanted to see everyone give their best, but he always remained empathetic and would give praise, but only where praise was due. Lee was admired by all of his staff, and this is evidenced by the large number in attendance today. It's clear from discussions that I've had with Lee's staff, current and past, that they saw him as someone that they could go to for guidance along with inspiration. I only hope that I can live up to the standard that Lee's set in this regard. As the other speakers have said, throughout his time at Hillross, he had many accolades: prestigious Hillross Strategist Member year on year, Treasurer of the Hillross Advisors Association, and most recently, in the year prior to retirement, he was awarded the highest accolade of all, being that of Amicus status. This may not mean a lot to people outside of his work, but I can assure you they are all absolutely outstanding achievements and well deserved. His work with various charities over the years is also testament to Lee's caring nature and drive to help others, including the work he did with Hands Across the Water, MS Society and Cancer Council, just to name a few. His long-term commitment and positive contribution to the North Adelaide Footy Club goes without saying. Lee had so many accomplishments to his name, but it was his family that made him proudest of all. To many people's surprise, Lee was first diagnosed with this illness around 17 years ago, but you'd never have known it. Lee never wanted to burden anyone with his illness, and he was always more concerned with helping others and simply getting on with life and focusing on the things he enjoyed the most. Resilience was another quality of Lee's. Lee's disease took so many heavy-hitting swings at him over the years, but they never once threw him off course for long. There were several occasions where it was considered touch and go, but the next thing you knew, he would always bounce back like nothing had happened. I guess we were hoping it would be the same outcome this time. But yes, he certainly was a resilient bugger, not just with his health, but also in business. He was dealt several bad hands before he took me on as his partner. Clearly his best decision ever. I can recall many setbacks that we faced together over the years, and Lee, unlike myself, would never lose his cool. I can still hear him telling me on several occasions, "Let it go, RL," he would say. "I've always been a firm believer in the saying that when one door shuts, another opens." And it was always comforting to hear him say that when things weren't quite going our way. And he'd always often remind me to be the bigger person. But resilience must be something that runs through the Virgin family, as this quality is clearly shared by Lee's wife, Robin. Ferg, the way you've managed through Lee's journey from diagnosis to this point is nothing short of amazing. You've held a family together, held a business together, and never once have you burdened anyone with the pressures that you've been under. Instead, you too have kept on giving and supporting everyone around you in the way that you do. The only way I saw Lee's cancer impact your lives is that it encouraged you all to live life to the fullest, and you were determined to show it who was boss. To put this into context, Lee was diagnosed back in 2002 or 03 if I recall, and at the time the specialists were giving him something like 2 to 3 years max. This was a really serious cancer that doesn't pull any punches. Yet here we are almost 18 years later, congratulating Lee on an amazing last fight. And I say congratulating because the way I see it, Lee didn't get beaten by this thing. He went toe-to-toe and bare-knuckled with a cancer that simply doesn't play fair. He dished out as many jabs and uppercuts as it gave him, and it was only in the last few weeks he simply decided that he would retire from the fight like a gentleman, going out whilst he was on top. He'd lived a wonderful life, seen his family grow and ticked many bucket list items that 18 years ago, when first diagnosed, may have seemed unlikely. So if I were the referee of this fight, yes, I would most certainly be raising Lee's arm as the true victor at the bell of the final round. It was his resilience, determination, support from his family and friends, and his love for them that saw Lee able to face up to this disease as a worthy competitor, return punch and go 12 rounds with it like a true champion. Whilst the medicine and the treatment played their part, I firmly believe that it was Lee's love of life, drive to continue helping people, and most of all the love for his family and desire to see them develop and blossom into the people they are now, that was his competitive advantage. Alyssa, Alexandra, Michael, I'm so glad that Lee was able to see you all grow up and share many precious memories with you and the grandkids. To understand how proud Lee was of his children, all he had to do was step inside his office, which I did every day for close to 2 decades. I will always remember the photos that stood tall upon his desk. His 3 beloved children, aged 10 and below, and then about 10 years later, a remake of that same photo was added alongside it. I also remember the black and white photo that Lee had of himself as a toddler on a swing. And I think he had it there because he absolutely loved the resemblance that you could see in a photo that he had alongside it of Michael at a similar age. God, he was proud of you, Michael. You've turned out a fine young man and a real chip of the old block. Alexandra and Alyssa, he raved about you and his darling grandchildren almost on a daily basis. He was so proud of the strong women that you've both become and the beautiful children that you're raising. When you were kids, he always used to talk about watching The Little Rascals, and he'd recite many quotes from it, and I know that he loved watching it with the grandkids also. Lee's love for his wife, Robin, was obvious and profound, as when he was around her, his warmth and wit shone most brightly. I worked with them both for 18 years, And outside of the odd bit of marital banter, which always had a humorous element to it, I never witnessed a crossword between the two of them. The mutual respect between Lee and Robin was palpable, and they were always able to keep it completely professional, to the extent that several staff and clients didn't even realise that the two of them were husband and wife. However, even in their attempts to distance themselves at work, the love was clearly always there. To Robin, Alexandra, Alyssa, Michael, the broader family, on behalf of Greg, myself, my wife Jenny, the staff at Hillross, AMP, and of course Leadham Shepherd, I offer our sincere condolences. Your husband, your father, your grandfather was a great man, and he will be truly missed but never forgotten. To everyone here today, when something doesn't go your way, just remember that when one door shuts, another opens. And Lee, if you can hear me, pal, thanks for everything you've done for me. I hope the door that has just opened for you has a big Winnebago behind it, stock full of Rockford's Black Shiraz, basket press, and of course, a pie warmer.
Well done, Richard, and thank you for those amazing words. I'm now going to invite Alexandra and Alyssa to speak about their dad.
My dad was a beautiful, proud, stubborn, loyal and generous man who would do anything for those that he loved, and he did. He was hardworking, but he always made sure his diary was clear on a Friday afternoon so that he could be home for party night with us. He'd be out cooking the barbecue while we rode our bikes around him, followed by us kids putting on concerts in the front lounge and modelling around in he and Mum's work clothes. As we got older, the events changed slightly. When we moved to Glenelg, our Friday nights often ended with our cousins Fraser and Taylor hanging out of my Auntie Jo's car sunroof, waving goodbye the whole 20 houses down the street. We started Wednesday roast nights with the boarders from Emmanuel, and Dad became well known for his Sunday night seafood cook-ups. Once I'd moved out of home, it turned into Dad lining up his appointments to come have lunch with me on my break, forever hunting for the best pad thai. After the grandkids were born, Sunday nights continued, although slightly differently, with Dad persevering with settling the most unsettled of babies and always first in line to assist with bath time, doing everything he could to make our kids smile and laugh, all the while making sure our wine glasses were topped up. Dad would often turn up at my place around 2 o'clock with a tray of finger buns or sausage rolls and eggs from John and Cheryl's farm, with a smile on his face saying, "It must be nearly coffee time, right?" He'd sit with Lucas while I raced around to get Emmy and Max, and we'd sit around the kitchen bench while he asked the kids about their days, gave them their recycling monies, and talked to us about the next family holiday he was planning or the next recipe he wanted to attempt for us all. They are the best memories and the simple day-to-day moments that I will miss the most. A few weeks ago when I visited Dad, he looked at me and said, as he often did, "Now, Bloss, don't tell your mother, but when this is all over, we're going to have a party. We're going to roll out the red carpet for all of our family and friends. We're going to have the best food and the best drinks." Dad always wanted to make sure he could give everyone the best of everything. And I remember thinking, how good will this be when it's all over? Now, this isn't the picture that I had in mind, Dad, and I'm sure you didn't either. But you got your wish regardless, and we're all here with you one last time. We love you, Dad, and we always will. It's bright. You will have to bear with me. I didn't inherit my dad's ability to write very well or speak publicly so eloquently, but I'm going to try my best. He spoke at my 21st and then again at my wedding, and if you were there for either of them, you would remember that he took both opportunities to absolutely roast me. But I've opted to not do that today. I really don't know what to say to you all. What do you say when words aren't enough? He was taken way too soon, and truthfully, the pain is indescribable. A traumatic few months for us all, to say the least. My dad was so many things. I couldn't ever work out if he was the grumpiest person I've ever met or the softest man in the world. Only once I hit my late teens, early 20s, I actually started listening to what he had to say. Did I realise what a life he lived before us all, and how cool I thought my dad actually was. Not that I would ever tell him that. I want to thank him for things like teaching me how to drive. Thank you for not getting annoyed at me for trying to tell him the road rules. And subsequently, I should thank him for not getting angry at me when I had my first accident on the first day of having my Ps. Ooh. Thank you for welcoming Nathan into our family. You guys are two peas in a pod, and I have loved watching the friendship between you both grow. I know how much you two love each other. I often felt like the third wheel. What you have done for him and I and our little family is monumental, and I think you know how much Nathan loves you. Thank you for your support after the birth of both of my kids and every day since. You made the adjustment to motherhood that much easier. Your support in my parenting has been incredible, and I will never forget just how much you did for me, especially in those early days. Thank you for my childhood. Thank you for weekends in Victoria, street parties, party night, late night fishing, and for mostly just letting us be kids. In recent years, thank you for being the driving force behind things like Sunday lunches and Virgin family Christmases. Your ridiculous smile as David comes out busting in the Santa suit is ingrained in my memory. You have given us so many wonderful memories, and I know that we will continue these things together. Thank you for continuing your parents' love of Wallaroo and for working so hard so that we could go there. Some of my fondest memories of you, especially as an adult, are at Wallaroo. On the deck or out fishing, sharing some almond magnums, taking in the sunset, and as you would say, talking way too much shit. Thank you for your support and encouragement in both my nursing and teaching career. He loved talking to us kids all about our work, as he's meant so much to him, what both my jobs were like, and I will miss having that with him. We had so many plans that we had already made for this year and next. This wasn't in our plan, and I'm so sorry, Dad, that we can't do them. You were so robbed of your time here, and when you've always fought for us, I'm sorry that I couldn't do more for you. The most tragic turn of events has changed things for us, but I promise I will set out to do every single thing we had planned, and I will cook every single recipe you have sent me in the last few months. I have no idea who will send me those recipes now, or sign me up for gluten-free cooking classes, or who will come with me to swimming lessons, or send me random Groupons for things I never knew I needed. I don't know who will book the holidays now, or make sure we have the most obscene Christmas lawn display, or who will make sure I've got eggs in the fridge, who's going to run the board meetings, bring me sausage rolls, or review every bakery in Adelaide, or who will talk to Nathan about some random fancy meat for hours on end, who will make sure the chips are extra crispy, well done. But I do know that because of the legacy that you have left, someone will, but just not quite as good as you. I will miss your almost daily phone calls and your ability to just pop up. I loved having you come to the Peas ward to bring me a peppermint tea, or randomly be at the bakery next to school just as you know I'd be walking over. I hope you know how much I loved seeing you every single one of those times. You were family first, always. Your dedication to your extended and immediate family was unwavering, and I know this is part of the reason that we are so close now, and something that absolutely came from Nan and Pop. I will miss so many small things. I will miss seeing you roll around in your Kathmandu jacket and beanie. I will miss your stupid jokes, your hugs, your obsession with random kitchen gadgets, your terrible singing, your stories, your giggle, watching you clean fish, your chicken salt crispy chip obsession, just sitting around chatting with you, sitting by the pool, watching you with my kids. I'll miss so many things about you, Dad, and I just want you to know how much I love you, because I really do. You remembered everything going on in my life, and to say there is a giant hole in my own life right now is an understatement, and the pain of that feeling is indescribable. Unbeknownst to me, a fortnight ago, I had the incredible honour of watching what ended up being Dad's last game of footy. We sat together talking about the game, and if you missed it, Bays defeated Noah by 3 points. He really did love football and how it brought people together. It is more than just a game. We watched Michael together one final time, like we had so many times before. He commentated the entire fourth quarter for me. He loved being a part of the North Adelaide Football Club, and I really hope in some way what he brought to the club stays with them forever. We have all enjoyed being extended members of the club and thank them, and in recent times the Glenelg Football Club, for so many wonderful family memories that we will cherish forever. If this time has taught me anything, it is to always be kind, something that Mum and Dad have always spoken about, probably due to the nature and understanding required in their jobs. This is such a horrible time in our history, and there are so many people hurting for different reasons. Be kind to each other, check on each other, because you just never know what's going on behind closed doors. A very accurate description of how I have handled this for a very long time. I do want to acknowledge how hard this is for so many of you in the room and watching at home. So many of you who either didn't know the extent of it, didn't get to spend the time with him that you and him both deserved. This is not at all how he should have spent his final months, and we acknowledge how hard this is for so many of you also. With that, I need to acknowledge my mum. The past few months have seen Mum be in scenarios on her own that no one ever should. She advocated for Dad and relayed information and questions to us all, which, by the way, when you've got a daughter who's a nurse, is horrific, and I'm sorry. When restrictions were at their peak and us kids weren't able to be there with them both, and I just want everyone to know just how much she has done for us all. The three of us will be forever grateful for what she did for Dad and how she handled herself during these times. An act of true love, to say the least. With that, I also want to thank our Auntie Jo for being such a wonderful support to Mum and Dad and for the role she has played in the past few weeks. I probably didn't say all the things to him that I should have, because I honestly didn't think this would happen. We enjoyed and cherished every moment we have had together. We are the kind of family that do everything together, and right now I couldn't be more grateful for that. In my eyes, my dad was like a real life superhero, a medical marvel, if you will. Nothing stopped him, and if he got kicked, he would get back up again. I feel robbed of my time with him, of my kids' time with him, and it's really hard to not feel angry. But one thing that Dad always said to me is that he felt truly lucky, and he meant it. He would hate that so many people here were sad, and he would want you all to know how happy you all made him and how much he loved the life that he lived. He would always say, "Look at my quality of life, truly. How much I travel and go about my day," and compare himself to other situations that he knows all too well. A few tablets and blood tests, no big deal. He would say over and over how lucky he was. And Dad, since last week, I have found myself repeating that in my head thousands of times, and I will continue to do so until one day, hopefully, I feel the same. My dad is the most incredible man, an absolute gentleman, for more reasons that I could ever try to describe. I know that we are all better people for knowing him. I am so lucky to be his daughter, something that even though he is gone, no one can take away. You are more than a dad to me. You are one of my best friends, and I can't thank you enough for the life that you have given me and the example that you have set for us all. While trying to write this, I came across a quote that said, "In 3 words, I can sum up everything that happens in life. It goes on." I know right now in this moment, it feels like time is standing still, but life will go on. Normal will look a little different, but it will go on, and you will still be in it
just in a different way to how I want. Have a beauty. Rest easy, Dad. You've done more than your fair share. Thank you for leaving us with such an incredible example of how we should all be walking through life. I hope that wherever you are, that burden you have lived with for so long has left you, and you are spending your time with the special people that you have been missing so dearly. Lastly, I'd like to thank you all for your outpouring of love for Dad to us. We are all truly lucky to be surrounded by so many wonderful people. Thank you.
Having heard all of these wonderful reflections about Lee, I'd like to now share with you a verse that describes what it is like to have led a life that mattered. And after that time, we'll listen to some songs and to look at some photos that the family has put together. And you can take this time to reflect on your own connections with Lee and the great man that he was. This life mattered. Ready or not, someday it all comes to an end. There are no more sunrises, no more minutes, hours or days. All the things collected, treasured or forgotten pass to someone else. Wealth, fame and temporal power shrivel to irrelevance. It matters not what was owned or owed. Grudges, resentments, frustrations and jealousies finally disappear. Hopes, ambitions, plans and to-do lists expire. Wins and losses that once seemed so important fade away. It no longer matters where you came from or on what side of the tracks you lived. No matter whether you were beautiful or brilliant, gender and skin colour are irrelevant. So what matters? How is the value of our days measured? What matters is not what we bought, but what we built. Not what we got, but what we gave. What matters is not our success, but our significance. What matters is not what we learnt, but what we taught. What matters is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate our example. What matters is not our competence, but our character. What matters is not how many people we knew, but how many people will feel a lasting loss when we are gone. What matters is not our memories, but the memories that live in those who loved us. What matters is how long we will be remembered, by whom and for what. Living a life that matters doesn't happen by accident. It's not a matter of circumstance, but a matter of choice. Yes, my friends, this life that we remember today, it mattered. As we think about Lee's life today, we can reflect on how it is that our own life became linked with his, and we can be filled with gratitude and gladness that he came to live among us. I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of everyone who is here today, and indeed the many people who have joined us on the live stream, to extend our deepest sympathy to Robin, Alexandra, Alyssa and Michael and their extended families. As we've all heard this afternoon, Lee was a remarkable man with a big heart, and he leaves behind an even bigger legacy. May I ask now for those of you who are able to please all be upstanding for the final committal. Now that Lee is at peace and freed from this life, we bid him farewell. We can all be grateful that we have walked some of our own life's path with him, and we can acknowledge all the good things he's done during his lifetime. We can be grateful for his example in life and for all of his achievements. We can be grateful for his friendship and for all the love that he has shared. And so it is with a heavy heart, but with love, affection, friendship and the greatest respect, that we commit Lee's body to be taken from here and returned to the elements, completing for him the cycle of human life and nature, from earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We farewell Lee from this life, and we take the love and memory of him into our hearts for safekeeping there. That man is a success who has lived well, laughed often and loved much, who's gained the respect of intelligent men and women and the love of children, who's filled his niche and accomplished his task, who leaves the world better than he found it, who's never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who looked for the best in others and gave the best he had. Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the service for Lee this afternoon. In a moment, Lee's coffin will be pallbeared to the awaiting hearse downstairs. Now, there is an option for family and close friends to follow the procession and to place a sprig of rosemary on Lee's coffin when it is downstairs with the hearse. We do today still have to be mindful of social distancing and the COVID regulations, so logistically moving this entire group downstairs and up again does indeed have its challenges. So for those of you who choose to stay, the refreshments and wake will be here in the McGarry room, and those who are going downstairs will be rejoining everyone very shortly back upstairs, so thank you.